Hey, Dragon Slayers. Right now, my blood sugar is 81. Then that's about 26 hours into my 36-hour fast that I'll break tomorrow morning. Today's topic is all about insulin resistance and how it is often the root cause of GERD, which is another one that just completely threw me for a loop. I found out about this from Ben Beekman in one of his videos where he talked about GERD and tinnitus being linked to insulin resistance. And so I started to do my own research, and sure enough, there are many, many studies out there. I put in the description below a link to two of them. I will share parts of both of them with you. The first one talks about how insulin resistance is the disturbance of glucose regulation characterized by higher insulin levels in clinical contexts. Insulin resistance can manifest as abnormalities that are related with cardiovascular event risk, as we've known as metabolic syndrome. Several studies had reported that insulin resistance was associated with erosive esophagitis in patients with gastroesophageal reflux disease. It talks about how the diagnosis of gastroesophagitis reflux disease, or GERD, is based on reflux symptoms. Although metabolic syndrome has been linked to erosive esophagitis, the impact of insulin resistance, the core of the metabolic syndrome, and the reflux symptoms remain to be illuminated. So the first study, it aims to assess the effects of insulin resistance on GERD, including both endoscopic findings and symptoms. So for the method, they used a total of 743 sonographic non-cratotic adult subjects who underwent an upper gastrointestinal endoscope examination, completed a gastroesophageal reflex questionnaire, and had available fasting insulin data where included. Endoscopic findings were classified according to the Los Angeles classification, homeostatic model assessment, insulin resistance, HOMA-IR index was used to evaluate the status of insulin resistance. And it talks about approaches that were used to evaluate the associations between insulin resistance and GERD. The results of the 743 patients that were endoscoped and had their HOMA-IR measured said older age, male gender, smoking, and alcohol consumption increased the prevalence of EO, but not GERD. So basically, if you were older age, right? If you were male, if you smoked, and you consumed alcohol, any of those factors or all of those factors, it increased the prevalence of in what was it EO erosive esophagitis, but it did not increase the prevalence of GERD, which is the gastroesophageal reflux disease. Now it says that a large waist circumference, high fasting blood glucose levels, and a number of metabolic syndrome components were associated with increased prevalence of both EO and GERD symptoms, while high blood pressure was not associated with the increased prevalence of EO only. Moreover, the higher scores in the gastroesophageal reflex questionnaire were associated with higher HOMA-IR. In conclusion, our findings demonstrate a clear association between insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, and GERD. Whether reducing insulin resistance may improve GERD symptoms or EO deserves its own prospective study. So the second study talks about to clarify whether insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome are risk factors for erosive esophagitis. And then it shows that they used a case study performed in a database by Samsung Hospital Medical Screening Center. The results were of 1,679 cases of erosive esophagitis, and 3,358 randomly selected controls were included. Metabolic syndrome was diagnosed in 21% of the cases and 12% of the controls. And they showed that they have all the numbers and stats, right? And it shows the difference in between the two groups, and that their conclusion was that metabolic syndrome increased insulin resistance and is associated with an increased risk of developing erosive esophagitis. So go ahead and check out those two below. There are many, many more studies that you can search as well. That's what I've got for you guys today. So remember that together you and I will slay the dreaded diabetes dragon as well as GERD.